Good evening and welcome to the Prince George's County Office of the Sheriff's Purple Light Nights October 2017 kickoff event. We couldn't be more pleased than to have you here with us tonight. Your presence shows caring. You demonstrate support. You signify change. You become a partner and raise awareness that can be the difference to aid a victim or better, prevent a domestic violence incident from occurring. Thank you for joining us in this work, and thank you for being here today. I'm Colonel Darren Palmer, and I serve as the Chief Assistant Sheriff. I will be your Master of Ceremonies this evening. Before we bring forward the color guard and our soloist, I will ask everyone to stand. This morning, our country suffered tremendous loss in another form of unacceptable violence. More than 50 people lost their lives, and hundreds more suffered injuries in a mass shooting incident at a concert in Las Vegas. Senseless loss of life, senseless injury. Innocent victims and families will be forever changed. As we prepare to begin our ceremony to raise awareness on the issue of domestic violence, I will ask that you all join me in a moment of silence to remember the lives lost, the injured who suffer, the people who love them that grieve, and for this country at this moment. Thank you. Please remain standing for the presentation of colors by our Joint Public Safety Color Guard unit, followed by the singing of our national anthem by Deputy Sheriff Kiana Graham. I ask that all uniformed personnel render a salute during the national anthem. Bring forward the colors.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched was so gallantly streaming, and the rockets regular, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Order! Right! Hey! Forward! March! Left. 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 Right. Left. Left. Left.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. Thank you very much to our Joint Honor Guard, and thank you, Deputy Graham. That was a wonderful rendition. I'd now like to bring forward Reverend Waters from the Glenridge Seventh-day Adventist Church in District Heights.
Let us pray. Dear Heavenly Father, creator of all mankind, giver and sustainer of life, we are here tonight to raise awareness with a unified voice that domestic violence has no place in our community. We are deeply saddened and thoroughly troubled by the recent violence in Las Vegas, Nevada. Our prayers ascend for the victims and their families. These days, O God, it seems that there is no safe place. If there is a place that should definitely be safe, it is our homes. So I ask your protection and watch care on all the homes here and the homes of PG County, this country, and the world. We need you, God. I ask of you your continued care for our officers. Watch over them and their families. We are thankful for each of them and always wish them well each day and night on the job. Thank you, God, for this opportunity to meet tonight. Help us this evening to get the message and to spread the message that domestic violence has no place in our community. In your wonderful and powerful name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Pastor Waters. We have a nice contingent of people here from Glenridge Church as well, and so we certainly appreciate your continued support. Again, thank you all for coming to this kickoff National Domestic Violence Awareness Month event. I would like to highlight a handful of the groups who we have with us tonight and some of our elected officials as well. So I'm going to point in this direction because I think that they were sitting over here. We have the Deltas in the house. Give yourselves a round of applause. We have the Kappas and the AKAs. And anyone else from other sororities or fraternities in the county, please give yourselves a round of applause. We have Rachel with us tonight representing Senator Ben Cardin's office. We have State's Attorney Angela Alsobrooks present, Senator Anthony Muse, Clerk of the Court Sidney Harrison, Delegate Angela Angel, Councilman Todd Turner, and Councilman Mel Franklin. And that's who I saw briefly as I moved around. We may have others here, and we'll try to recognize everyone who was with us. Aside from our presenting sponsor, Pepco, our leadership partners have a special status at this event. They have joined with us and have stayed strong as they lit up their police stations and municipal centers. Please give all of our municipal governments and elected officials from those municipal governments and our police chiefs a round of applause. Once again, as you see, the county has lit the county administration building purple. Fire departments are covered in purple light, and the police department is beaming light into the sky. Prince George's County Public Schools Sasser Administration Building is lit, and more information than ever is being shared in our public schools. But also the University of Maryland, Prince George's Hospital Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault Center, the Prince George's Community College, the University of Maryland, the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission, the DC Divas football team, and Carrollton Enterprises. They're also great partners, and they're taking action to raise awareness. In fact, I'll tell you that all I can say about Parks and Recreation, and this is their building, is that they have been an outstanding partner in every way. I want to highlight a few more organizations. our civic partners who have been Purple Light Knights partners from the start, the National Coalition of 100 Black Women, and 100 Black Men of Prince George's County are with us tonight. Give them a round of applause. The young adults that you interacted with to receive your light bulbs tonight are part of the Jack and Jill of America National Harbor chapter. We appreciate their civic engagement to assist tonight and their chapter for doing their part in raising awareness. Listed in your program are a number of daily partners who are at the core of helping victims and raising awareness. Many of them are represented here with us. Please take note of the agencies and individuals working in Prince George's County. I want to acknowledge Sheriff High's Advisory Council. President Helen Cordero is here with us tonight. Would all the members of the Advisory Council raise your hand? I know it's getting dark, but this is an important group to the Sheriff. They provide direct input from the community, and so I want to thank you all for coming. Please give them a round of applause. I look forward to highlighting other partners and supporters throughout this evening. Purple Light Nights simply cannot happen without you. This is our 4th year, and attendance grows, and more bulbs light more buildings and homes than ever before. The wheel at National Harbor will be emblazoned in purple light. Tourists and guests, locally, nationally, and internationally, will know domestic violence will not be tolerated in Prince George's County. Purple Light Nights is about raising awareness, and it is evident that this has been a successful effort. Yet we all know there is more that needs to be accomplished. We are thrilled to be able to build upon the work that has been done and the work that takes place every day. This evening, I have the distinct privilege to bring forward our keynote speaker. At the very onset of his administration in 2010, County Executive Rushern Baker has made leadership and collaboration his benchmarks for sound government. On items of public safety, he immediately invited in his elected partners, Sheriff Melvin High and State's Attorney Angela Alsobrooks, and he embraced their knowledge and experience as an added value to these important discussions. Understanding domestic violence is more than a criminal matter, he expanded the county's planning to enact change and betterment involving critical partners like Ms. Betty Hager Francis, Deputy Chief Administrative Officer for Health, Human Services, and Education. Through this unified effort and funding commitments to nonprofits and the Family Justice Center, he has been a leader on the domestic violence front. Please welcome County Executive Rushern Baker.
Thank you. First of all, I want to say that I'm glad to see that we have the Deltas in the house. Can we give another round of applause for them? The AKAs, another round of applause. And I took a really nice picture with the Kappas out there. And I just want you to know the Omegas are in the house too. There you go. Daryl, I want to add my condolences and thoughts and prayers and the thoughts and prayers of the county out to the families and victims in Las Vegas. I know just like what we're doing with the families that have been traumatized in Puerto Rico and the islands and in Florida, we too will send out our prayers, our thoughts, and offer our support to the city of Las Vegas for anything we can do there. And so please keep them in your thoughts and prayers. I too want to extend a thank you to Ms. Betty Hager Francis for the leadership that she has done with her team on domestic violence and making sure that our county is better. Can we give her another round of applause, please? And Hank Stawinski, the chief of our police, if we can give him a round of applause. And I know Ben Barksdale's out there, our fire chief. And I don't know if Mary Lou is here, but our correction officers, we give them a round of applause too. I want you to know that they are symbolic of the men and women who work with them every day. that they understand, like I do, that we don't actually do the work physically ourselves, that you are on the front line. You in the community, you working in our departments, you who see the victims coming in and help them are on the front line. We are simply symbols of what this county is committed to. I was lucky as county executive when we came in, we faced a number of problems, that I didn't have to face those problems alone. That we had a team of people not only that were appointed by the county executive, but elected officials countywide who understood that it is bigger than just us individually in our capacities. And that if we were going to solve the difficult problems that faced us here in Prince George's County, we had to do it together. And so when we saw a rising homicide rate in Prince George's County during that first year, everybody could have ran to their corners. The state's attorney's office could have said, you know what, the county executive needs to be doing more to curb the violence in Prince George's County. The sheriff could have said the county executive needs to be doing more about domestic violence in Prince George's County. But they didn't. They came to a meeting, they brought their top staff. So I want to give our state's attorney a round of applause for the great work that she has done to make this county safer. I especially want to single out and give praise to the man who called us here tonight with Purple Light. Domestic violence and stopping domestic violence is not just simply a slogan. It's not a campaign theme. It is not something you do to win office and then you forget about it until the next 4 years. It's not something you simply say, well, if you think about it, let's put it on the top of the agenda. For this gentleman, it was top and center. He understood probably better than most of us who had been elected how important it was that we get a grip on this if we were going to help Prince George's County to really live up to his potential. He understood better than most of us that this is not an issue that's going to be solved by simply arresting people. That we required the use of not only family services and social services in our health department, but the community coming together and bringing awareness. That the faith community had to step out with us because you're the first line of defense. You're the people that people who have been abused go to first. They don't come to us first. And I want to thank him personally for making sure that every time we talked about funding for the departments, domestic violence was at the top of it. We wouldn't have this night. We wouldn't have the focus around the county. We wouldn't see the results that we're starting to see. And we're nowhere near where we want to be. But he has made it a calling to make sure we're safer. Can we give Sheriff High a round of applause? I'll close with this. In my spare time, I just travel around the state these days. For no particular reason, I just like traveling. But as I travel around the state and I talk to individuals and groups, it always circles back to, well, how did you do those things in Prince George's County? I mean, how did you, are they real? The reductions in crime real? Are the impact we're making in people's lives real? And I said, yes, they are. And he said, well, how did you do it? I said, well, I didn't do it by myself. I did it because we had people who were willing to put their egos aside. People who knew, understood that it didn't matter who gets the credit. It matters what work is being done. And I know, as I go around this state, and we'll talk about, the fact that this is the type of unity we need to make our country better, to make our state better, and to make our county better. Thank you for being part of that team. God bless you, and keep up the fight.
Thank you, Mr. Baker, for your words and for all that you do. In each public safety agency in the county, work is being done to raise awareness and curb the tide of domestic violence. Counseling takes place with offenders in the Department of Corrections. Thank you, Director McDonough and Captain Gordon for being here. As noted, every fire station in every community in Prince George's County bears purple light. Thank you, Fire Chief Barksdale, for all of your help. 911 call takers provide guidance to victims and direct aid to them as a highest priority. Thank you, Director Whittington, and welcome. Mr. Mark McGall, the Deputy Chief Administrative Officer for Public Safety, and Police Chief Hank Stawinski are, of course, phenomenal partners, and they do deserve a special round of applause. Ms. Hager Francis has been acknowledged. Her directors, Ms. Elena Balan Butler of Family Services, Ms. Gloria Burnett of Social Services, Health Director Dr. Pamela Kriegmer, and others like Ms. Sophie Ford from the Family Crisis Center and Ms. Denise McCain of the Family Justice Center are all wonderful partners. And we do this work for one reason: to eradicate incidences of domestic violence. And until that time is done, when we are at 0 incidents, we will work tirelessly to support the survivors. I want to bring forward Ms. Sharon Taylor to the podium. Sharon serves as the Public Affairs and Legislative Liaison at the Sheriff's Office. She also demonstrates her commitment and caring for victims of domestic violence through events like tonight. Sharon, along with our own domestic violence advocate, Ms. Barbara Harvard, have dedicated many hours to ensure tonight is a success. And look at what a success it is. As Ms. Taylor comes forward, please give a warm round of applause to both of these ladies for their hard work.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. I ordered the weather for you, and it's just a lovely night. It's my pleasure to lead the Office of Communications and Public Affairs in the Office of the Sheriff. It is Corporal Dennis, Deputy First Class Lakeisha Brooks, and Sergeant Brown back there, whom many of you know. And they are who many of you heard from about the Purple Light Nights ceremony and about some of the other incredible events our partners will be doing throughout the month to strengthen our fight against domestic violence. We will post those on our blog posts, so please join us because we'll be at many of them as we can be. Tonight, we wanted to leave you with a purple light bulb and that special spirit and energy that happens when our community comes together in common cause. But we also wanted to leave you with a reminder of the incredible strength and resilience that is available to us when we can lean on family and friends and faith and each other. We wanted you to hear from survivors of domestic violence. These are stories, I promise you, you will never forget. On the idea of tonight's program, the Domestic Violence Intervention Division, led by its commander, Captain Monica Jackson, and our Special Victims Assistant Supervisor, Ms. Bordeaux, and Senior Special Victims Assistant, Ms. Harvard, said to me what they always say to me: yes, we can do that. And so on their behalfs, we are pleased to present Survivors Take a Stand. Ladies.
Good evening. My name is Domino Addison. Surviving death from domestic abuse made me realize that it was a pattern that had gotten worse. From high school, where I was made to feel like I had to be like the rest of the girls, loud and fast, ultimately got me raped by the person that I thought loved me. I had the guy in school that every girl wanted. I was fresh from DC, and by my own standards, I didn't have anything to prove. I was being tested almost daily because of where I was from. It was almost like they were jealous because they had more than I did. See, I moved from DC to Maryland, from the hood to Maryland. They had more than I did, but yet and still, I was made to feel like I was less of a person. Living like I always had to defend myself, never losing a fight, made me into a bully, which made it easier for me to be popular and to get the boys that I wanted. So when the biggest drug dealer in the school decided he wanted to be my boo, I was all in. I just knew that this was going to be the best thing in the world that ever happened to me, and he was going to treat me like a queen. He actually did in the beginning. Then one day, I decided to go to his house. I popped up, and I found him with another girl. I was devastated. We fought, did a number on him, and I left. Later that month, he calls me over. I was small, but I was feisty. He calls me over and he wants to talk. So I wanted to hear what he had to say, and I went over, and he started with, "I'm sorry, she was just somebody that wanted to be in your shoes." I shouldn't have let her, but I did. Then he pulls out a photo album and starts to go over all the pictures that we had taken throughout our relationship. I got up to leave because at this point, I had heard enough. It was enough for me. He grabbed me and he said, "Where you going?" I said I was sorry, but I told him that his sorry was not good enough. He closed the door and he locked it. He had a privacy doorknob because he was one of those kids whose parents let him have whatever he wanted. He was never told no. So I didn't know how to get out of his bedroom. When I tried to grab the key back from him, he pushed me and he grabbed me by my throat and pushed me down on the bed. Again, we fought, but at this point, I was weak. I was emotionally weak. He got the upper hand and he ripped my shirt and he looked into my eyes, and what I saw was horrifying. I screamed for help and he punched me in my face. I fell off the bed onto the floor where he violated me. Afterwards, he told me that he was sorry, but at least we're back together now. He said, "You know that if you tell anybody, nobody will believe you because you're my girl." So I never told anybody. I suppressed it, and I became a nightmare to the people around me, not just in school, but in my own home as well. I began to fight everybody. I became a monster. The pattern picked up in college. Because I wanted love so badly, I was going to make somebody love me. So every man that showed me attention, I made him the love of my life. You see, I didn't come from an abusive background, though. I came from a home where I only saw love. Think about it, I only saw love. I didn't see my mom and dad arguing, so I didn't know how to fight fair. I didn't know how to argue fairly. My arguments were with my hands. So whenever anything would frustrate my mom, my dad would make it okay. He would fix it. So I never saw how to really have a fight or an argument. I did what I was good at, again, which was throwing my hands. Finally, I found my husband. Keep in mind that God says a man that finds a wife finds a good thing. And you heard me say, I found my husband. So everything really did just get worse. He loved me the way I wanted to be loved in the beginning. Then I found myself with no friends, very little contact from my family, giving my paychecks to him, and being subjected to rants about how he couldn't stand to look at me anymore. Until one day, his alcohol was the accelerant and his anger was the fire. He decided that I was no longer worthy of living. We had gone on a couples trip, and I ended the trip early because he made a spectacle of us by drinking and acting like a madman and accusing me of wanting to sleep with his best friend, who was there with his girlfriend. Come on. I cut the trip short. I wanted to go home. When we got home, we got in the house, got the kids together. I started dinner. While two of our boys were upstairs playing, my baby was in the high chair in the kitchen with me. So I started dinner. My husband then, walked through the kitchen to leave out the back door, I thought. I turned around to get something out the pantry, and he was right there in my face. He stands 6 feet tall, and he was 250 pounds. It startled me, so I pushed him back, and when I did, he grabbed me by my throat. He picked me up off the ground by my throat. He shook me as if I was a rag doll, and he banged my head into the kitchen counter. It was at least 4 times. That's all I can remember counting. I remember fighting back by scratching his arms and digging the skin off of his arms as best as I could. I remember him letting me go, and I fell to the floor. I heard him talking, but I couldn't really understand what he was saying. He picked me up again off the floor by my throat. This time he pressed both of his thumbs into my esophagus and pushed as hard as he could. I was trying to fight, and the only thing I can remember thinking at that point is, I'm getting ready to die. I didn't want to look into his face since this was going to be my last breath. The only thing I could think of to do was to focus on my son, my youngest, that was sitting in the high chair. Our eyes locked. My 18-month-old son looked into my eyes as if he knew that his mommy was about to die. The next thing I remember is the room going black, and then I'm outside. I have no recollection of what happened between me passing out and me getting out the house, but I got outside, and I realized when I was outside that my baby was in my arms. I had my cell phone. You know, ladies, you keep your cell phone in your shirt sometimes. I remember my cell phone was in my shirt, so I grabbed my cell phone. I called my mom first, and my mom got me to call the police. The police got there, and the first thing one of the officers said when he got out of the car was, "Are you the one that called?" And I just remember screaming and crying. And the other officer that was with him asked me to turn my head to the left, and I did. And the first thing they did after that was draw their guns and went into my house. I didn't realize that my husband at the time's handprints were all over my neck. And I screamed for them not to go into the house because my other 2 sons were in the house. So he called them, one of the officers called them to come down. And at that time, my mom was pulling up. They came out. The police officers brought my husband out in handcuffs and a bloody shirt. I have absolutely no idea how the blood got on his shirt. I can speculate because there was a knife laying on the floor. The next thing I know, I'm being told that I need to get to the commissioner's office, I need to press charges, and that's what I did. And I had to go through every detail of everything that happened in that kitchen and prior to. That wasn't the first incident, but it was definitely the last incident. It was the incident where I woke up. I was given some information to call someone at a family crisis center by one of the police officers. I called, even though I was scared, I didn't really know what to say, and it turns out I really didn't have too much to say. But a lady named Miss Sarah Ford, she helped me, and she made me feel like it was okay to talk to her, even though I didn't want to speak to anyone else. She actually gave me the courage to confess to my mom and to the therapist that I'm dealing with now, even to today, exactly what happened. Going forward, God also gave me the strength and the insight to form what is now my nonprofit, Exquisite Ladies of Diamond Class. We work with individuals of domestic abuse and violence, victims and survivors. We have a partnership with the Sheriff's Department as well as the Family Crisis Center. Tonight I stand before you as a survivor. I am a survivor, and tonight I stand for those victims of isolation. Reach out, get help. Domestic violence has no place in our community. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Yvette, and I was married for 17 years. Throughout my marriage, when we would have a disagreement or an argument, my husband would grab me or pin me down to keep me from walking away. About 2 years ago, my husband attacked me in our home. In the process of this violent attack, I protected myself by stabbing him. My husband was arrested, and my children and I had to leave our home because it became an active crime scene. After going through my ordeal, I was able to stay with family and figure out what my next step would be, which brings me to the next chapter of my life. I got help through counseling and in divorce care through my church. The work with my therapist was very vital to me. I am currently a member of the NEA Foundation. The NEA Foundation is named from the book of Nehemiah that talks about building up a wall to strengthen and protecting the community. The foundation was created by my cousin, our president, Shanae McGee. We have several board members. The work that we do is that we offer 72 hours of protective stay for any victim of domestic violence. We realized that not everyone had a place to go in an emergency. We now partner with 5 hotels within the county of Prince George's County. Being able to assist other survivors of domestic violence has allowed me to bring a sense of peace and calmness to others in their time of need. I am a survivor, and tonight I stand for all victims of the form of abuse that is intimidation. Reach out, help. Domestic violence has no place in our community.
Good evening. My name is Al Collins. My journey through domestic abuse was physical, emotional, and verbal. My abuser was my ex-husband. Now, I must tell you, my husband of 24 years now says to tell you that it wasn't him. My abuser had me believing I was dumb, stupid, ugly, and that if I left him, nobody else would want me, because I had 4 small children. Who in the heck would want you? But I survived. I suffered broken ribs, stitches, black eyes, and bruises, but I survived. I even jumped out of a moving car once to avoid getting punched in the face with his fist again by my abuser. I survived. Little did I know at the time that I was being prepared for the work that I currently do for the Family Justice Center as an intake specialist, where I can hopefully help others survive. When I was being victimized, there were fewer resources available to me than there are today. I told my parents about what I was going through, and all I got was perplexed looks. They didn't understand, didn't know what was causing it, because I had not grown up in a home that fostered that kind of behavior. I told my in-laws, and my father-in-law had no idea how to respond, and my mother-in-law simply said, "Oh, you know, these men do these things." And I was ashamed to tell my girlfriends. So much for support. So my journey back to wholeness had to be stirred up from inside of me because I didn't have the external support that I needed. I had to go deep down inside of myself and find the courage, find the tenacity, find everything that God had put inside of me before I was in my mother's womb. Those are the things that I needed so that I could move forward to a free life for me and my children. I had to call up the courage to fight for myself, the courage to endure, the courage to stand up for myself, the courage to be the best me that I could be. I somehow, and I say I somehow, but now I know it was the Holy Spirit that had me develop my own safety plan, had me find an apartment for me and my 4 small children. But one day came, and I moved out. I waited until he went to work, and when he got home, I left him with 3 things: 2 ashtrays and a stereo. I figured that's what he brought to the marriage. That's what I was going to leave him with in the marriage. Today, survivors are fortunate because you have so much more support. The support networks in the form of organizations like the Family Justice Center that serves the needs of people impacted by domestic violence, sexual assault, human trafficking, and elder abuse. Family Justice Center works with over 20 partnering organizations to provide a range of client-centered services. At the Family Justice Center, we have over, like I said, 20 partners, and it's such a privilege to be a part of the center, helping survivors to find hope and restoration in their lives. You see, I'm a survivor now who helps others survive. I'm walking in my purpose. And at the end of the day, it is such a rewarding walk. And tonight I stand for victims of physical, emotional, and verbal abuse. And I say to you, reach out. There's help. Domestic violence has no place in our community.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Sharon, Reverend Sharon Harley. In 1999, entered into my home several victims of domestic violence. Little did I know, as someone else has already stated, that was the beginning of what God had purposed in my life to do. But I was only just helping out, doing what I knew to do to be there for someone in need. In 2010, fast forward many years, I met a young man who I thought at that time was the best thing to ever happen to me. He even said things like, "I won't be happy until I get in your head." And I thought, oh, he loves me so much. He was being honest. He really wanted to get in my head. But getting in my head, getting in my mind, that's a form of witchcraft. Because no one should ever have such power and authority over you that you cannot think for yourself. But I didn't know then, because I thought he loved me. Up until the point in which we got married, all of those wonderful things that he would say, even to promote me to have speaking engagements, they were really great. But what would happen once we got married, every time I ministered, immediately he was ready to fight because he felt that I must have looked at some man in a way that disrespected him. Things began to get worse. And then we separated because the violence began to pick up. he began to get me to a place where emotionally I felt no longer that I was in control or in charge of what was going on in my life. Everything, because I really wanted to be with him. He was so kind to me at a point in time that I really needed someone to talk to me. See, I was in a point of being broken myself. And one of the things that I learned that when you're broken, two broke pieces will not make a whole piece. And so because I was broke and I was weak at that time, again, I just really did not see all of what was going on in that time of domestic violence. It may not have started off as a hit upside the head, but emotionally, he was bringing me down, getting me to a place where I would totally feel that I had to have him. He began to treat me as if I was property. And so I did everything I thought I needed to do to please him. And so as time would go on, we separated, I moved on and did everything I thought I could do. And through the grace of God, he actually ended up speaking to the lieutenant or the chief of police and perpetrated as a victim. And I received a phone call. He gave them my number, interesting enough, but this was all a part of God's plan. So I rejected the help once I informed the lieutenant as of what was really going on. But several days later, I started getting all kinds of threats through social media. Everything that's on social media, you really have to be careful of. That's a form of terrorism. And so when someone is doing something even through social media to destroy your life, to prevent you from even being strong in what it is you believe you have been made to do on earth, again, that's violence against you. That's a criminal act. But I continued, and then I figured, you know what, let me take this lieutenant up on his call. I knew nothing about the Justice Center. So I called the lieutenant back, and that was the beginning of where I am today. I am a survivor. And after all of the years of being there for other people, supporting them, going to the courthouse so many times so they thought I was a part of the courthouse, I said, no, I haven't received a check just yet. But I did not know how to help myself. But I got the help that I needed to realize that I do have a voice for myself. And as I began to get active in the events that they were doing, I found my strength. I found my strength in my voice. As I am standing here before you today, I am a survivor. I'm no longer ashamed because I'm a reverend. I use everything that has happened to me to help my congregation, to help those, and further do what's necessary to take the stigma off of keep it silent. No longer will I be quiet about the things that have been intended to strip me of the very dignity and right that God has given me. And so today, I stand before you as a survivor of the coercion that this man tried to give to me, someone that I once thought loved me. I stand before you as a survivor of the emotional damage that I had, because on one hand, he's lifting me up, but on the other hand, he's tearing me down. I stand before you as a survivor tonight, to no longer put a lid on it, to no longer be silent, but to raise my voice as loud and proud as I can to make sure and be a part of there will be no more violence in Prince George's County.
Good evening. My name is Anna Nina Johnson. Throughout my life, I have endured many types of abuse. As a child, I was sexually abused by a neighbor, and I never talked about it. At that young age, I endured my pain alone and in silence. At 18, I was brutally raped by 3 individuals. After that, I didn't love or value myself. My self-esteem was very low, and I felt abuse was a natural part of life. From that point on, all my relationships were abusive relationships. I married a man
who was abusive to myself and to our children. I stayed in that relationship for over a decade as me and my children endured agonizing abuse on a regular basis. One day, I did find the courage and I left. Thinking that that part of my life was behind me, I got into another relationship that was a million times worse than the relationship that I left. Although me and him had no children together, he used my children against me. Whenever we had discussions or things or decisions to be made, he put the kids in the middle of our relationship. He had my kids turn against me by saying mean things to me and also helping to put me down. One day, after leaving him, he asked me if I could bring some items that he left in his car. I was thinking, since it was during the day, and when I talked to him, he seemed like he was in a good mood, that I felt like it was safe to drop those things off. I pull up at the address, and he's already standing outside. I pull up and I roll my window down a little bit, and I tell him that I'm going to put his items on the sidewalk, and then I was going to leave. He got upset because I wouldn't let him in the vehicle, because a week and a half prior to that, he attacked me and I ended up in the hospital. He starts to yell and get angry. So for my safety and me being fearful, I decide to drive away. But without me knowing the neighborhood, I drove into a dead end and I had to turn back around. When I turned around, he was standing in the middle of the road. He walks up to the driver's side window and starts punching the glass. Repeatedly, after I begged him to stop. Eventually, fearing that he was going to break through the glass, I tried driving away a second time. This time, he rides on the hood of my vehicle. Afraid that I was going to run him over, I put on my brakes. He stands up on the hood of my vehicle and starts to kick my windshield repeatedly. I'm screaming for help. People come outside their homes. People are just walking down the street and they just watch. Eventually, my windshield cracks and he comes through the glass. And as soon as he does, he says, "You didn't think I was going to get in, did you?" He starts punching me repeatedly in my head and tells me to drive to an abandoned house down the road, where if I got there, he was going to beat me to death and no one would find my body. I start driving in between the blows to my head, and a voice that I know was God told me to get out that car and get out of it now. I hit the unlock button. I jump out running with the car still moving, screaming and running for someone to help me. He jumps out after me and chases me down the street. He finally catches me and starts dragging me as I kick and scream for someone to help. It's a nice spring day. There's kids riding their bikes. There's people watering their lawn, and everyone just watches like it's a normal thing. Eventually, a lady that I call my guardian angel yells outside that I'm calling the police. He eventually lets me go, and I find safe haven inside her home. The police apprehend him that day, and he goes to jail. And the saddest thing about that story is the fact that many people see me that day being assaulted, and not one person called the police. The only person who had the courage to call was my guardian angel, and that was because she was also a survivor of domestic violence. A lot has changed since then. I finally left my abuser, Me and my children got counseling through the House of Ruth, and they're doing wonderful. I left, when I finally did leave, I found a safe haven in the Family Crisis Center. The Justice Center also helped me, and I'm the first graduate from the Stay in Touch program with the Family Justice Center. Today, I'm starting to love myself. I know what a healthy relationship looks like. I'm also in school right now to get my degree in pre-law so that I can help work side by side lawmakers so that I can change how the prosecutions are handled in domestic violence cases. I'm also a volunteer for the nonprofit Exquisite Ladies of Diamond Class to help advocate and bring awareness to domestic violence because it's an epidemic. I am a survivor, and tonight I stand for all victims of abuse whose children are used against them and who are physically and brutally abused. Reach out. There's help. Domestic violence has no place in our community.
Hello, my name is Linda Shaw. I stand here a survivor of 17 years of domestic violence. Yes, 17 years. It may be hard for you to understand and comprehend, but as you know, victims of domestic violence go back and endure victimhood over and over before they realize that enough is enough or that things will not get better but get worse. Those are just the facts. 17 years. During the 17 years, I experienced abuse by my ex-husband. He abused me using male privilege, with spiritual, religious, isolation, and mental forms of abuse. You see, I serve God 24/7. It was not just a Sunday thing. I believed God, and I wanted to please Him with my walk and with my life. As a wife, I did my best to follow the Word of God and make sure I crossed every T and dotted every I. I did what I thought I was supposed to do as a wife and a mother. You see, my husband was also a man of God, and he used his knowledge of the Word to coerce and control me over the years. He knew I wanted to please God. We attended one of the mega churches here in Prince George's County. We were even part of the ministry, close to the pastor, and spent a lot of time with them. My ex-husband was one of the top deacons, armor bearer for the pastor, and armor bearer for the pastor, in a position of trust and honor at the church. We even had marriage groups at our home for years, but no one knew. I did not tell anybody. I kept it to myself. I was in isolation, because I didn't want to jeopardize his position at the church. So I spent a lot of time trying to keep it all together, sacrificing who I was, and wearing the badge of blame when things went wrong. My abuser used all of this to control me. I was taught that divorce was against God, so he used this to keep me in bondage. My abuse was male privilege. He would intimidate me with a look, minimizing me, demeaning me, and blaming me. He made light of his abuse of me and used things I shared with him as a husband against me, and denied the abuse by shifting the blame on me for the abuse. Emotionally, he put me down, made me feel bad about myself, called me names and made me think I was crazy by playing mind games to humiliate me and making me feel guilty. I was beginning to believe that what he was saying, and I was afraid to share what I was going through with anyone. He had me in isolation. He controlled everything by telling me I was not being the submissive wife I should be, as in Proverbs 31. He had me questioning who I was and whether I was serving God as I should. If I resisted him, he would make sure others outside of our marriage saw how I interacted with them. People that knew nothing about what was going on in our household would tell me how I needed to show more love to him. One night at Bible study, he was playing with the back of my neck. I kept telling him to stop, but he wouldn't. So I ended up moving the children between us. You see, we were this picture-perfect family, and no one knew what was going on in my home. After Bible study, I was in the ladies' room, and the mother of the church came in the ladies' room, and she came up to me, and she told me, being a good wife meant to endure, and I needed to learn that. She didn't know that just moments before, he had cursed me out and called me some humiliating names. Wow, was she off the mark. Because I felt I was to blame, I hadn't gone to the pastor or shared anything that was going on, that I was going through, but rather that we were having problems. They scheduled a marriage counseling where we both were in the room. Domestic violence never came up. I thought for years I wasn't praying enough. I thought if I read the Bible more, and if I learned more about the women in the Bible, I could ace this thing. But that's not true. Because no matter what I did, it didn't matter. You see, you cannot change anyone else. They have to want to change themselves. My ex-husband used male privilege throughout our marriage. He blurred the lines between what God meant by being a submissive wife with abuse and power and control. That is why it's important that we continue communicating, educating, and helping places of worship such as churches, synagogues, mosques, temples, monasteries, and wherever anyone may worship. We need to continue to educate them. We have found that a lot of places of worship are in denial, and they feel their congregation has not been affected, or they don't know how to handle domestic violence when confronted with it. A lot of them may also confuse domestic violence with marital problems. I really was believing that if he didn't do anything to our children, everything would be okay. I'll be able to endure this. I can handle this. But it would just be a matter of time. I thought that no one would find out what was really happening as long as I kept it all together. I could tell myself it wasn't happening. I could tell myself it wasn't that bad. I can function. I can exist. But not true. On March 25th, 2001, I paced the floor as I did many nights when my husband didn't come home. I prayed over my family, over my marriage, over my children. I prayed over my home, still trying to figure out what I wasn't doing right and what I should be doing to make things better. I confronted him when he came in the house at 5:30 a.m. I told him this has to stop. He proceeded to curse me, push me, and yell at me. My children ran down the stairs. My oldest one had a butcher knife in her hand. Mind you, she was coming downstairs. The kitchen is downstairs. Why did my oldest one have a butcher knife in her hand? Why? She said, "Leave mommy alone, daddy." My 8-year-old was on top of the stairs screaming and crying. She screamed, "I called the police, mommy. They're on the way. Daddy, stop." My husband proceeded to go towards our oldest child. He said, "What are you doing? What are you doing? Are you gonna cut me? I'm your father." I jumped between them and I said, "No, stop, enough is enough. Stop doing this." I could hear the sirens in the background coming up the street. He turned away, threw his wedding band in the grass as he walked out the door towards the police. As they began to talk and question him, he says, "Over, I'm out of here." My survivor journey began there. I took out a protection order and worked with the Family Crisis Center and the services they had to move forward. I think that was the answer to why God allowed me to go through what I was going through. He wanted to use me to be the mouthpiece and move into my purpose. He wanted to use me to help victims to take the next step into their purpose. Today, there are many great projects that are educating and helping religious organizations understand what domestic violence is, helping them to develop domestic violence ministries. There are workshops and conferences like the Interfaith Initiative, which takes place this month on the 25th, the Red Flag Conference, and the Momentum Conference, which looks at the male perspective of domestic violence. There is bystanders training for faith leaders in identifying red flags by the progressive life. Girl Talk, Straight Talk, Men Removing the Mask, and Cut It Out, all programs under my advocacy program, The Next Step, Advocates Against Domestic Violence. I am a survivor, and tonight I stand for all victims of male privilege abuse. Reach out, there's help. Domestic violence has no place in our community. May God bless you all.
Good evening. My name is Reverend Georgie Solomon. I pastor a church. I also work for the Prince George's County Office of the Sheriff as a victim's assistant. I had no idea why I ended up in domestic violence in the first place, but now I realize that there was a purpose for it all. It was an unhealthy journey I took with my ex-husband. It began with emotional and verbal abuse while we were dating and included relationships with other women and continued with affairs during our marriage. He had a child with another woman during our engagement and fathered another 8 years into our marriage. I saw the potential for physical abuse clear when he threatened me with a knife before we were married. But it actually started once we were married. The characteristic signs of abuse and an unhealthy relationship were there. Imagine these as part of life for me, which I accepted, telling myself, this is just the way he is. Our one daughter witnessed our behavior, and to this day, she is reluctant to speak of it. The emotional, verbal, and physical abuse escalated over 23 years of marriage. Constant criticism, name-calling, making the car undrivable to control me, driving recklessly to scare me. He wouldn't stop for a rest break, even when we're traveling. He withdrew support and love and affection and allowed women to call and come to our home. His response on being confronted was, no one got hurt but you. Many times he hit me upside my head on many occasions, but that was just something that I would always go back to, reminding myself, this is just the way he is. He hurt me physically if I questioned him about his behavior or drugs. I was so deflated, void of self-worth and esteem, accepting his behavior as normal. I even accepted his other children, welcoming them into our home to do whatever it took to please him. You see, I was a Christian who believed in the sanctity of marriage. Early on, my ex-husband had been a good provider with a good job who paid our bills, bought us cars, a house, pets, until his addiction. He drank some and used drugs occasionally, but that all changed when he became addicted to cocaine. Controlling me financially was the primary abuse I endured because his money went to drugs, along with my jewelry and my car, which he loaned and got back and loaned again. He took money from our bank account. The further he spiraled downward, the more I was committed to helping him. Staying became my addiction. His employer helped him into a rehab center, which he completed, so I would pick him up at night to keep him clean. On one night, he convinced me not to pick him up. He got drugs and lost his job. So now, there is this new crisis for me to help him through. I even sold my home in Washington and bought a new home in Maryland, hoping a new environment would change him. He didn't change, I did. Everything fell to me when he lost his job. I'd attempted to lose so many times I would attempt to lose control, but thank God I didn't. So I had attempted once to leave him 15 years earlier because the abuse emotionally and physically was just unbearable after a while. But even though I tried 15 years earlier to leave him, that didn't last. It had been very hard on me financially and without a car, busing my daughter to and from school every day and myself to and from work in between. So therefore, we moved back in with him. We only stayed away a month. So from this point on, the financial piece really became such a challenge. When everything failed to me financially, I knew I needed to try to make a change again. I couldn't tolerate the abuse anymore, and now with a car, I had some freedom. I was working 2 jobs, and my daughter had graduated from high school. It took me 23 years to finally get the strength to realize how important and how worthy I am as a person to be treated right and not be treated wrong. It takes us some time to realize that. I pray differently now, because at first I was always praying that my marriage would work, that my marriage would heal. But I began to pray differently now. I stopped asking God to heal and save my marriage. I started asking him what he wanted me to do. God showed me my escape route in a dream about a woman named Pat with a basement for rent. I thought it was my friend Pat who directed my choir, but she told me her basement was occupied, but that her neighbor Pat had a basement for rent. Over a month's time, I gradually moved my belongings from my dream house in Maryland to her basement without his ever knowing my plan. This was the beginning of my full journey towards self-empowerment and personal independence. I was granted a divorce. I've been doing the work of healing, and as I continue to do so, I have become really ready to move forward in my life toward wholeness and wellness and without regret. And I'm so thankful for the office of the sheriff in which I work, because truly it has been a blessing to work there, because I've been allowed to talk with others, to understand where they are, because it's nothing like knowing what someone is to be able to have empathy for them. So I'm so grateful for the Prince George's County Office of the Sheriff, where I am at SVA. I am a survivor, and tonight I stand for all the victims of financial control and abuse. Reach out, there's hope. Domestic violence has no place in our community.
Good evening. My name is Minister Lynn Strange. I am a domestic violence expert and PR specialist. Growing up as a little girl, I remember the countless days of peering out my bedroom window. Those days expanded the vividness of my imagination to dream. Among my dreams was of getting married, having children, teaching, and being a doctor. Those dreams would make me smile. Those dreams broke through the depths of my inner pain and turmoil. What could cause the little girl, who was me, to experience so much pain and turmoil? My mother was challenged by her decision to give birth to me, with concerns about economic and marital stability. My father insisted that my mother have an abortion because just 9 months before my mother became pregnant with me, my brother was born. Despite my mother trying to abort me, praise God, I kept growing. My father alleged that my mother never even sought the abortion and stopped communicating with her for the remainder of her pregnancy. My father's decision launched a vindictive attack against me by my mother. My mother accused me of ruining her marriage. That was the attack that launched on me during my childhood, bombarding me with rejection, abandonment, isolation, lack of understanding, being called a demon by my own mother and siblings. As anyone could imagine, this would cause any child to spiral into a deep pit of despair. So I survived so many days engulfed in emotional pain and with a burning desire just to be touched in love and nurtured and to be accepted by family, parents, and siblings. I grew into my teen years filled with only emptiness inside. I constantly sought intense emotional contact. I pursued with fervor to find love, acceptance, and to feel valued by my family. At the age of 20, I was seduced by a false love and acceptance. I entered a bone-chilling cycle of horrific marital abuse at the hands of my now deceased husband. I had been introduced to my husband while visiting my cousin's husband, who was incarcerated at the Prince George's County Detention Center. They were cellmates. Truly, it must have been obvious from this encounter that my desperation for love and attention was at its peak, while my self-esteem and self-worth were at their greatest depth. Little did I know, becoming a pen pal to this incarcerated man and living with a Metropolitan Police detective and becoming involved with him after his release from jail would entangle my soul and life into the bondage that is a domestic violence cycle. While dating and even during our marriage, I was sodomized with objects over and over again. I was raped repeatedly and I was strangled to unconsciousness. Both my eyes were blackened. I received busted lips. I was dragged on the highway, Central Highway here in Maryland, pulled from the sunroof of a car while I was 6 months pregnant, false imprisonment on numerous occasions, and he threatened to kill me constantly. I was terribly fearful of my husband and his threats to kill me. But something took a turn for the better for me. On January 31st, 1999, my hope for freedom became a reality. I was abused for the last time 2 days before on January 29th. My husband arrived home after working, drinking, and getting his paycheck. Typically, he would give me his paycheck to avoid losing money on drugs and alcohol. This time, he was adamant about keeping his money. I reminded him that the rent was due in a couple of days and that he was the sole breadwinner in our home. But under the influence of alcohol, he became angry and physically abusive to me. He kept beating and punching me again until both my eyes were blackened and I had bruises all over my body. He took his keys and went to the car and said, "You will be dead by January 31st, 1999, just 2 days before he had beat me," which was really a horrible time for me. I prayed and I prayed. I sought refuge from God, my family, and my friends. But no one came to the aid of me and my 3 young daughters who were only 3 months, 15 months, and 4 years old. On the morning of January 31st, 1999, the same day my husband had threatened to kill me, detectives from the Metropolitan Police Department in Washington, D.C. arrived at my home here in Prince George's County. They informed me that my husband had been murdered at 2 a.m. that morning. My husband was murdered by a drug dealer who he was threatening and bullying to give him free drugs. God is good because after spiritual counseling and therapy, I was propelled to pursue educational and employment goals. I was impassioned to regain control over my life and live with complete determination to overcome the horrors I had endured. I had to rebuild my life economically, which I began to do when I became employed for the Prince George's County government in 2004 as a 700-hour employee for the court administration office right over across the street at the courthouse. I was given the opportunity to serve 2 highly esteemed people, the former court administrator, Ms. Suzanne James, and the Honorable William Missouri. Grateful for the employment at this time, as I was able to move 3 children and myself from Section 8 housing. Working was an important asset for me and my family, as resources and support from the community were lacking and scarce at the time in the county. Today, praise God, I'm elated to see the Family Justice Center with all the professional partners inside. I often ponder the substantial impact, influence, and benefit that all those services available in one place, like they are today, would have been for little old me in my life years ago. But today, by the healing and delivering power of God, I am a survivor. And tonight I stand for all the victims of coercion, threats, and rape. Reach out, there's help. Domestic violence has no place in our community.
Ladies, thank you so much. Your courage and your words are powerful. We will keep you in our prayers as you continue on your individual and collective journeys, and we thank you so much for everything that you do. The vision for the Sheriff's Office to serve and protect victims, raise community awareness, engage partners, and direct change comes from our sheriff, Sheriff Melvin High. I can personally attest to his passion to provide safe, well-educated, and connected communities, and his compassion for those in harm's way. Sheriff High's leadership and steadfast commitments to remove incidences of domestic violence from our communities has propelled the Sheriff's Office to provide the highest levels of service to victims every day. It is with great honor that I present our next speaker and our host of Purple Night Nights, Sheriff Melvin High.
Thank you, Colonel. And I'll be very, very, very brief. I only have about 4 brief chores to do. And the first chore is to thank all of these ladies here. Join me in applause for them. So I want to thank Ms. Collins, Ms. Solomon, Ms. Shaw, Ms. Johnson, Ms. Addison, Ms. Harley, Ms. Billups, and Ms. Strange for their willingness to share such personal and very, very powerful stories. They let us look inside a very personal, terrible time of fear and hurt that illustrates what domestic violence is. We really accomplished our purpose here tonight because we were able to see 2 important things. We were able to see the face of domestic violence in their stories. And we also saw what our goal is, to have people be survivors. And so right here in front of you, we see survivors. So again, thank you ladies for being here and sharing with us and helping to enlighten us. I next want to thank all of you for being here with us this evening and sharing in this moment. And then finally, I want to thank the county executive for coming and sharing some of his thoughts with us here. Absolutely. Over time, I've come to know that he's a man that makes some hard choices and hard decisions about things that are important to our community. And he's made our county a better place. So certainly my privilege to be associated with him. And finally, I want to thank our partners who helped us to do this evening, Park and Planning, all of the staff from the Sheriff's Office who were participants in pulling this together and making sure the logistics and all of that worked, but Park and Planning, and also my friends over in Family Services. I think Betty Hager Francis has had to move on, but she and her staff have been here and they've been great partners with us. And so I want to thank them for being those great partners and all of you. And with that, we're going to do what we've came to do tonight, and that's turn on the light. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff. You have heard the focus in Prince George's County. Public safety, our courts, mental and medical health communities, and public and private social service entities have all worked together in a truly collaborative manner to bring forward real-life, tangible resources and education in the fight against domestic violence. Just before we flip the switch, let me recognize some key people in the Sheriff's Office that have made tonight happen. Lieutenant Colonel Mark Roccapriori, Assistant Sheriff for Field Operations, Captain Monica Jackson, Commander of our Domestic Violence Intervention Division, Miss Bethany Bordeaux, along with her staff of domestic violence victim advocates. Sergeant Brown, Corporal Dennis, and Deputy Brooks have served as great ambassadors sharing the information within our community. And finally, let me acknowledge Lieutenant Colonel Orlando Barnes, Lieutenant Colonel Ron Terry, retired Lieutenant Colonel Regina Taylor, Mr. Mark Spencer, Steve Ornstein, and all of our captains and Major Saunders. Please raise your hand so that you can be recognized, and then we will count down and light the lights. Okay, we have our PEPCO representative that is here with us, our great sponsor for tonight's Purple Light Nights, Miss Tammy Watkins.
Thank you. I will be incredibly brief. We at PEPCO are very proud to stand with the lovely ladies on stage here today, and thank you so much for sharing your stories and your experience. We at PEPCO, these lights mean more than just the bulbs and the electricity. This is a reminder of our ever constant work to educate and empower women, and we feel as a community to overcome domestic violence. So thank you so much.
All right, now we're going to count it backwards from 10. Everybody, please join in. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Light it purple. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for coming out and being with us tonight. Thank you for your continued effort. This concludes our ceremony. Please have a safe evening.
Thank you. God bless you. Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Come on.